Hello, fellow patriots. This is KellyJackson with TruthWire News, Tennessee's most trusted news source. And today I have the distinct pleasure of welcoming my good friend and brother at arms, Shawn Graham, who is a native Memphian and managing director of Conservative Christians of Tennessee, which works to inform Tennesseans on Christian worldview issues, which we have so many these days. He is also a co-host of the weekly show Faith in Action. Shawn, thank you so much for being with me today on this beautiful Saturday. I have so been looking forward to this conversation, and you and I have been talking about some of those things that are such hot topics right now, and help people understand what has happened to the church, specifically the SBC, and how it happened and what impact that is having on the current political landscape. So many people don't think politics and religion should mix, when in fact, it is that very idea that has caused evangelicals to resist recognizing and calling attention to the woke ideology that has infected the church like a cancer. So what I want to do is I want to approach this at a very fundamental, elementary level for people who are just getting this information for the first time and they don't understand why their pastors, especially their pastors in the Southern Baptist churches that proliferate the South, are not utilizing their platforms to imbibe their congregations with facts and information, warning them of the dangers of wokeness. And in many cases, especially with the mega churches under the SBC umbrella, they work to integrate woke ideology into their doctrine. So first question I have, can you explain in as basic a way as possible how this ideology has crept into our churches and over the past decade or so captured the leadership who seem determined to expand it within the church?
Well, Kelly, thanks for having me on. I'm really excited to have this topic, especially right now, because we're talking right now about an election cycle where of the 50 million evangelicals, there are predictions by Barna that 24 to 28 of them, they're going to stay home this election cycle.
Oh, that's worse than last time.
It's unacceptable. There's no reason for that to ever happen.
Yeah.
I think this is a pertinent issue, but I've been telling people as we discuss this personally, this is a hard topic, especially as a Baptist myself. This is a very personal topic, and we've messed up. We dropped the ball somewhere on the way.
Yeah.
I could go back probably a couple centuries and we talk about the encroachment that comes through the church.
Yeah.
And we can talk about how deliberate it was. There was an attempt made to soften the effects of the evangelical church on the globe. And this is a socialist movement, and we can talk about it being deliberate. But what I've done in the past, several months, I've been trying to tell people there's a way to learn about this. And if you feel like the conversation's over your head, or you feel like I just don't know what's going on or why things are a little bit off, well, there's a way to learn. There's a 3-step process I have for telling people. I think that Voddie Baucham's book that he put out 2 years ago, Fault Lines by Voddie Baucham, is a fantastic, what we call in the homeschool world, a grammar book. And what it does is it teaches you the terms, the definitions, the grammar of the issue. And today our churches, they don't know the grammar of this. When we talk about woke ideology, when we talk about critical theory, do you understand that critical Marxist theory incorporates sexuality? There's critical Marxist, there's a critical theory that's not just the CRT that we know so well. Everybody knows that concept.
Yes.
But it's the critical Marxist theory.
Right.
And so Voddie Baucham's book's really great at giving you the grammar so that you understand those terms and definitions. Then I think the second part of that goes to really, Megan Basham's book talking about the shepherds for sale, talking about how those terms and ideologies that are pointed out in Voddie's book are really shown very well in her book, how they're being bought off with those terms, the pulpits, the institutions, the churches, the seminaries, all of these people that you see at these big EVA groups, as we call them, the evangelical churches are being moved. And so it goes from grammar to a dialectic kind of argument at that point in her book. But then the third part of that is, if you really want people to see it and understand, it's not just Baptist, it's not just Presbyterian, it's not just Catholic, it's all of the church that's being affected.
Right.
I recommend Judd Saul's movie. Sorry, tongue's getting tied. Judd Saul's movie, Enemies Within the Church.
Okay.
Enemies Within the Church is an excellent documentary on the length of time it's taken
Yeah.
for the institutions of America to be corrupted, to have these institutions, these mainline institutions we had, Methodism, Episcopalian, all of those kind of denominations that were once stalwarts for the gospel of Christ.
Right.
None of them stand for biblical truth anymore. They've all deviated on several different parts of it. And you look at the Methodists now, they're welcoming of gay indoctrination, and that there is absolutely no barrier. They're absolutely repulsed and against conservative views in their church now as of this summer. So I think that three-part system allows people to start having the conversation, have the grammar behind it where they can talk about the terms and definitions. But then the movie kind of shows you, the historical take, and it gives you the argumentative, so you can make the arguments on it from well-grounded conversations. So that way, when you talk to your pastor and you say, look, I know you went to Southwestern. You may be at a Presbyterian church, but I also know that you went to an institution that's had a lot of liberal influence over the last 30 years. So let's talk about that. Why are you saying this from the pulpit? Why are you talking about critical theory? And now you can start to have conversations with these people and that are influencing your neighborhood, your family. You're going to be able to carry these conversations into the school board meetings that you go to. You're going to be able to carry it everywhere you go, because all aspects of this really go back to the undermining of the Christian values of America. And that's really the root of, when you look at why people are trying to influence the church, they're trying to devalue all of the American values they see.
Well, and that leads perfectly into the next question that I did have is, would you say that the infiltration of this ideology was purposely injected as a means to soften the moral resolve of churchgoers in what is arguably the most conservative area? I mean, specifically, I know this goes across the country, but it's going to affect our area the most because we are the most conservative area of the country. They have an agenda, and it seems like every time they're trying to accomplish something, they just run right up against those morals of those churchgoers. So would you say that that is part of the reason why they have undertaken this?
Oh, most definitely. I don't think there's any doubt about it. When you look at somebody like a Russell Moore, who was the head of the lobbying group for the Baptists. So the reason we talk about the Southern Baptists so much is not because I am Baptist. It's not just me talking about my home team. It's because we're the largest block. I mean, when there are 14 million of us, you think about the size comparison. The LGBT army that you see out there advocating and winning on so many levels is only about 12 to 14 million people at the most. Flip that coin over, and you've got the Southern Baptist Institution, which is 14 million at 36,000 churches around our country, and they don't get nothing done. So it is a very clear contrast between one ideology being given all the reins and one having all the reins stripped from them. So enter into that, you're Russell Moore, your institutional head who's running the lobbying group for the Southern Baptist Institution, the ERLC, the Ethics and Religious Liberty Council. That group right there advocates for Christian principles in governance, right? That guy right there, that one person, is from the stage at a seminary, he's telling everybody, my greatest influencer in my life, my mentor, is a socialist, was one of MLK's right-hand men, platforms the guy, talks about, this is the greatest influence in my life. I hope everybody can get to know him. I'm so glad to share this guy with you. And the guy's on the stage going, everybody knew we were socialists, even MLK. We all admitted it. This is who is running these institutional heads and pushing the policy. There is not a question of whether they're trying to undermine our traditional values. They're not on our team to begin with. And I can say the same thing, not necessarily in the SBC, but with Tim Keller. And Tim Keller, everybody loves Tim Keller. Everybody wants to. And, since he has passed, it has become very hard to talk about the reality of Tim Keller, because it's not that I hate Tim Keller. A lot of people benefited greatly from the teachings of Tim Keller. He has been an influential teacher. And don't get me wrong, I do believe he said some good stuff and has put
Yeah.
some great teachings out.
Yes.
But his foundations, his fundamental upbringing through college and his
Yeah.
institutional upbringing was not traditional. He
Wasn't
had
he from
Marxist.
the Frankfurt School? Wasn't
Yeah,
he
he's
affiliated
definitely the
with
Frankfurt School. So that's again when we talk about those terms and definitions, and you pull
Yeah.
this in, you talk about the Frankfurt School, these thoughts and philosophies that have influenced him. They were socialist background. These
Yeah.
were direct differences to what we would consider to be traditional Christian fundamentalism.
Right.
So when we say his teachings were off, when we say Kellerism was broken from the foundation, it's not an attack on Tim Keller or the work or the benefit for Christ that may have come from his life and his work.
Yeah.
But what we're talking about is there's leanings, there's angles, there's a slide here that is away from traditional biblical conservatism into something that's not. It's a third wayism.
Yeah. Yeah. It's it blows my mind how often I see things. That's the problem, I think, is I see it. So many people around me don't
Yep.
see it. I see it, and it seems so contradictory to what I've always known and understood to be Christianity, in my belief in Christianity. And I see people just sitting there nodding their heads with something that's
Yes.
just the exact opposite of what we know as Christians. At the very least, in your spirit, you should be sensing something.
Yeah.
And if you are, most people are ignoring it and just not doing anything about it, or they just simply aren't sensing it at all. But let's talk about, since we're talking about the churches, and we're talking about some of the teachings that are going on within the churches that this uh move this progress this ahead. Let's talk about it's called the After Party.
Oh,
It's a
goodness.
Bible
Yes.
study co-authored by David French, who is
Mhm.
local to Tennessee. They live right here in Williamson County, where I live. Tell us who David French is and what this Bible study's goals seem to be.
I could go for days on this because this
Yeah.
is one of those great examples of what happens next.
Yeah.
We talk a lot about how the mainstream, we've lost the Episcopal Church, we've lost the Methodist Church.
Yeah.
This is what happens next. It isn't that we're losing the Baptists or we're losing the Presbyterians. What we're doing is we're sliding them ever so slightly
Yeah.
into something that's a homogenized social cultural mix of just nastiness. I mean, this
Yeah.
is what when I would that I'm going to spit you out of my mouth. This is the putridness that needs to be
Yes.
spewed out of people's mouth. This is not a clear, concise gospel. This is something that's different. And it's not right. I had a church here locally. The pastor said, Shawn, he said, we went to the MLK 50 event in Memphis, and we went there and we heard what should have been a great time of honoring the civil rights movement and the progressive movement of good in our culture. He says we go, he takes part of his church staff, and they all are scratching their head when they're hearing what's going on. They're watching these things. And he said, Shawn, we came home, and he said, we had more questions than we did answers. So we didn't enjoy it because everything seemed almost right.
Right.
Everything seemed very close to true, but it always had extra, or it always had something different. And they came home and started studying it and quickly realized that all of what was being taught was ate up with CRT.
Yes.
To begin with. The critical race theory was all in what was preached. And of course, this is another Russell Moore thing.
Yeah.
He was the one directing that. But the theories behind it affected what was being said from the stage. So when you and I talk from a microphone,
Yeah.
everything that went into our institution, our schools, our background, our learning comes out one way or the other.
Yeah.
These guys are espousing beliefs from woke, liberal, and socialist standpoints. So when they come and they take the pulpit in these big churches and they say this stuff, well, then the people in the pews are like, well, I trust them. So what they're saying, I'm going to believe. I'm going to rely. They get platformed credentials. So whoever gets platformed has the credential, has the educated voice in the room. So we trust those. We default to the platforms, which is wrong for us because the pews truly have all the power. We just don't take it.
Right.
But that's a long conversation for another day.
Yeah.
The reality of it is what's going into the pulpits now is debased. And we need to be able to speak back into that. Talking about specifically what our buddy is doing here out of Tennessee. Look, David French is not a friend of mine. And I am very clear that our political paths have gone in different directions. There once was a time when I would have supported him for a local position in government because I really did think that he was a principled conservative.
Yes, because we're talking about a guy who used to write for the Conservative Review.
Yes.
He was, in the upper echelons of conservative politics. He's a Bush era Politico associated with guys.
Military.
Yes, Bill Kristol. I mean, these were stalwart conservatives. And now he's writing for New York Times and basically saying, oh, the pinnacle of liberty is being able to take your kid to a drag queen story hour.
Yeah, you can't. His idea of a blessing of liberty is allowing drag queen story hour to take place. And he said that in the Atlantic. And so what we have to understand when we're talking about something like the after party, there's so much more that goes into this conversation before we just get to it. David French, one of his greatest moments is talking. I mean, and he said this in a public interview, talking about going to a Yeezy concert and how great and how spiritual it was and how awesome that went. Look, if you don't have the discernment to at least hold for 2 seconds on Kanye, I'm not so sure you need to be leading Bible studies for America and specifically in our Baptist churches. You sure don't need to be having a voice because you missed it last time when you were trying to tell us what to do. And I clearly think that the garbage he's spewing out with this team is not going to be any better because, I mean, frankly, this is not a team that's put together based on, your rock solid biblical teaching. This is a team that is your social media dream. These are the people that the New York Times and CNN will platform. That's the only reason they're doing this. It's not because they have foundational biblical teaching to share with the world. No. This whole conglomeration exists for one reason. It's because it's media friendly. And that's what they're trying to do is get more face time for this woke slant. Again, it's all about that slant and the slide to the left. This is the church can be accepting. Oh, the church can be winsome and so kind and so pleasant. And we can not fight. And we all have Trump derangement syndrome, but you people over there are dirty and nasty. And we'll clean you up if you come in and you take our after party teaching. And just listen to what we're saying, because we're clearly smarter than you, is what they're saying. And that's why it's only going to the Atlantic, New York Times, these big institutions of liberal media love something like this. But what you don't see is the John MacArthur's of the world, the conservative pastors simply going, oh yeah, that's good teaching. It's not going to happen because it's not there. This isn't good teaching. This is a media event.
Well, and what's interesting to me is it seems like part of the whole reason they call it the after party is so that you can, it's not about you don't pick a side. Don't involve your politics in your religion. Politics has nothing to do with religion. Oh, I beg your pardon. It has everything. You tell the Black Robe Regiment that during the Revolutionary War, it has everything to do with picking a side because one side is moral and one side is not. So you can't.
Well, there's a reason why Indiana is the Hoosier state. And it's not because they were a bunch of basketball players. In the founding of our country, the Hoosier movement came from an African-American pastor named Hoosier who absolutely changed the country for Christ by evangelizing and spreading the truth of the gospel. And he got a drunk, redneck, rebellious land of criminals to be Hoosiers, which meant they weren't the drunk rednecks. They were different. They had been converted to the Christ that he was preaching. And it made that land such an example that people said, ooh, Hoosiers is a great thing.
Yeah.
We want to be known for this great stand for Christ, the biblical principles will found our land
Yeah.
and they will make our families better. That's what we have to go back to, not to some, let's just find a way to get along with the media and
Yep.
we'll do something that's popular. And it's a complete 180 on how our nation was founded, because this is not principled. This is
No.
populist.
Well, speaking of principled, and you and I talked about this too, I think that sort of leads into the next question, which is we're talking about principled non-voters. That's kind of what the Frenches sort of call themselves. They are conservative because they're not voting for Donald Trump. Voting for Kamala Harris actually makes them conservative, and it's because it's about principles. So, that in and of itself, that push that you and I have talked about seeing all over the country, that is an effort. Do you see that as an effort to keep, once again, to not only keep those 20 million evangelical voters at home, but to increase those numbers?
Oh, I don't think there's any doubt about it.
Yeah.
If you look at this election cycle and you don't think that somebody is targeting the stay-at-home Christian vote, you're not aware of the political fight that's ahead of us. I mean, we're in something now where the data on polling, the data on voter blocks is so laser focused.
Yeah.
We know inside of male demographics, things that people would have dreamed of knowing, right? So we know that the male resurgence within the church that's happening right now,
Yes.
is important to this election, because the fact that men are returning to the church while women are not, for some reason, it skews a lot of politics as well, because now you have to fight against that male Christian conservative vote that is going to be very sincerely voting their values, because what we're seeing through the Barna data is that the Christian male returning to church block is very solidly principled. They do not vote with the abortion. They do not vote with the modernist group. They do not vote with feminine issues. So understanding understanding the laser focus of our actual demographic knowledge now tells you that yes, there's someone looking at the church as a block and asking the question of how do we get them to stay home. I think one of the biggest things that I'm seeing on social media, and I have been making note of this too, I'm looking at accounts that haven't been really politically active, or they haven't been specifically targeting the evangelicals. So I've seen a lot of noise and a lot of I've seen media blocks writing stories. I've seen a lot of talking heads, and I wonder, are they being told? Are they being fed? Are they being paid? Because we know that some of we've seen some of the social media influencers have said they're getting paid like 15 to speak out against these different groups. So I wonder if some of them are, and we're not going to hear that in the next 30 days. But I think afterwards, I'm looking for that story to come out, because I think I'm seeing it just through my observations of the media. I think I'm seeing a deliberate movement or opposition against church theology for the voting block. It's not the abortion. This battle's always been, and I've been saying this for years, this election's all about abortion.
Yes.
The majority of the vote is gonna swing one way or the other based on abortion. It's the other stuff that's gonna win it, though.
Yes.
So you're gonna have these marginal groups that they're able to target with lasers, and you're able to add 0.5% here, 0.5% there. The election itself was always set in stone. It's going to be based on, you put 45% of the people over here on one pod, you put 45% of the people over here. That's the vote. Now, how do we get the rest of the people? And I think they're really targeting churches and trying to say, some of y'all need to stay home, be principled. Don't come out for this. You don't need to really speak out if you're a real good Christian, a principled Christian would stay home with this, which really the Bible doesn't teach that at all. The Bible teaches that for us to actually love our neighbor. That's one of the greatest chapters in Megan Basham's book, by the way. If everybody hadn't read that, there's an entire chapter in there talks about the stupidity of how loving your neighbor has become a bullwhip that's used to beat
Oh,
everybody to death. Oh, love your
yes.
neighbor, do this, that. Well, if I really love my neighbor
You're going
in
to
the
be
biblical
honest with them.
sense,
You're going to tell them the truth.
that's right. That's right. I'm not
Mhm.
going to let them walk off a cliff. I'm not going to let them shoot themselves with a gun that doesn't work. I'm going to have, rules and regulations that affect them for good. Same way with abortion. If I love my neighbor, I'm not going to let them die in the womb at the hand of a
Right.
mass murderer. There are clear biblical principles that we can adhere to, but there's something going on, and I think you're right, Kelly. There's a and I don't know if it's a push to say or whether it just is part of the desperation, because I don't
Yes.
know that I don't smell a little desperation on the
Yes.
part of the Democrats here.
Yes. I mean, and you take states like ours, Tennessee,
Mm-hmm.
red, it's going for Trump no matter what.
Oh, yeah.
Yet you see and hear of tales of digital billboards being put up just south
Yeah.
of me here in Murray County, who they produced Andy Ogles, who's now sitting in Congress, who is
Right.
by most accounts considered one of the most conservative MAGA congressmen that
Mm-hmm.
we have sitting in our delegation. But you see these billboards being put up down there in Murray County for it's conservatives, Murray County conservatives for Harris and Walls.
Nice.
Everyone is just mystified, like who are these people and why are they putting up this billboard? Well, then you dig in a little bit and you find out, well, it's this guy named Seth Campbell who's actually a Democrat. He paid for it. I have seen the check, the canceled check
Wow.
social media post. However, there is no clear indication as to who these conservatives of Murray County are. Nobody will say who they are. So it's one of two things. Either there are no conservatives of Murray County, and this is just like a Democrat Jedi mind trick. They're trying to play on
Yep.
people, conservatives, Republicans in Tennessee, or we have people like our friends, the Frenches, who are
Mm-hmm.
utilizing their Democrat friends to put up this nonsense to try and, like you said, it's a desperate ploy to try to get people sort of freaked out, maybe to maybe sort of question their choices, and are
Mm-hmm.
they really virtuous? Is credit, these are conservatives and therefore maybe I should reconsider. Is voting for Donald Trump
Mm-hmm.
make me a bad Christian? They do that to mess with your head.
Yeah. And I think it goes along with the deconstructionist movement that you see going through
Yes.
the evangelical teaching. We've seen books written about this, about how the deconstructionist stuff sounds so
Yeah.
good and it
Yeah.
sounds so welcoming, and you get
Yeah.
into it and you're like, hang on, that ain't right. Something's wrong in here. It
Right.
smells good, but terrible when
Right.
you get into it. And
Right.
I think we've seen how that's worked in the normal Christian churches to just kind of chip away. And we've got there some of our greatest teaching comes from Genesis 1 in the beginning.
Yes.
We set the story right, and it's an epic from there.
Yeah.
And Ken Ham always says, if I can get you to disagree with the creation story, the
Yes.
rest of the Bible's easy to write
Yep.
off. And I think this is kind of the same
Exactly.
thing. If I
Yes.
can get you to disagree just a little bit, you don't really need to vote. It's okay.
Yep.
You be good and you stay
Yeah.
home. And if I just can push just a little, I don't have to convert you
Right.
from being a Republican. I just need you to stay home.
Right. Do what feels good. Do what your
Mm-hmm.
conscience is telling
That's
you to
right.
do. And I mean, that's been a cultural push. I mean, probably since before, but I mean, when you think back on our modern history, it's that
Mm-hmm.
whole love the one you're with, and the whole thing, the cultural revolution that it started in the
The
60s.
feels.
The
It's got all the
feels.
feels.
Yes,
That's
it's
right.
all the feels, the Jesus movement with the feelings and the
Mm-hmm.
love, and it's just sort of carried over, but sort of manifested itself in new and different ways
Mm-hmm.
so that people don't recognize this is the same snake oil that they tried to sell
Oh
you,
yeah.
or they've just repackaged it.
Well,
And
Kelly, we interviewed Alton Williams, and he's a pastor who went viral for a Black mega church pastor in the heart
Okay.
of Memphis. And this
think
is one of your great sermon. And he says, I just can't do it. And I just can't vote for the Democrat Party. I can't vote for their
Wow.
wickedness. I cannot do it. And that right there,
Yeah.
I think that is what they don't want. That you
Right.
don't want people saying, no, don't, no, stop, hard stop.
Yeah.
Anybody who's south of that, we're okay
Right.
with that. You want to be
Yeah.
conservative, that's fine. Just don't
That's fine.
vote. Yeah, you
Right.
want to be in your Republican camp, that's fine. Just don't vote.
Don't
You know,
act on it.
do the
Mhm.
right thing, don't vote. And
Right.
we've heard this in Memphis, in the Shelby County area, and voting for decades now.
Yeah.
We hear people going into polling precincts, young Black man in the last election cycle. And I had talked to this guy about an issue, and he was going in to vote. He was like, man, I've never heard anybody explain. He said, thank you for taking the time to talk to me. I want to vote for that.
Okay.
And as he was walking in the door, elderly Black female,
Yeah.
you're going to do the right thing, right?
Yes,
And he
ma'am.
looked at her,
Yeah.
yes, ma'am. And I guarantee, and he avoided me on the way out of the
Yep.
precinct. So I
Yep.
guarantee you, he switched his vote because do the right thing. See, that's that emotional appeal. When we get
Yeah.
past truth, when we get past what's better for our neighbors, when we get past the stand of what I know I should be doing, and I just want to do what feels right, do the right thing.
Yeah.
Emotional appeals
Yeah.
really do work when we don't have a principled nation.
Oh,
And
yes.
the reality is, we've created through our school system, through COVID indoctrination, through all this stuff, we've created an entire community
Yes.
that just wants minimal pushback,
Right.
minimal, grief. Just leave me alone. I want to die fat and happy, and just let me alone. And I think that we've got to get back to everybody understanding your vote should be controversial in every way.
Yes.
Because you're not voting for that person that's running. You're voting for the platform and the policies that'll make our country stand better or fight better. If you want to be a war hawk and go out and fight, that's fine. But you got to understand that should be affecting your family. And your children should be the ones that are fighting those wars that you're standing up for.
Yeah.
If you're not a war hawk, you should be against that completely. And you should be advocating for policies of peace and passivity.
Yeah.
But we're not doing that. It's just whatever's easy. I can't engage on that. That's not nice. That's not civil conversation. We've devalued civil debate and civil conversation in the church, even to a point where the pulpits refuse to speak out on these issues. And that's why when you find an Alton Williams who's out there actually speaking and say, I can't do it. I can't advocate for that anymore. I don't care if I'm Black. I'm not voting Democrat.
Yeah.
That kind of thing seems so rare now. We don't see it because the pulpits and everybody, they're cowards. They're just afraid to stand up for what they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
And so when you see it now, that's so abrasive.
It's shocking.
Oh, it's so shocking.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
Yeah. I think it's generational too, because you and I were Gen X, right?
Oh, yeah.
So I remember when my grandmother, who she was a Democrat her whole life, in her house, as I was growing up, there was a photo or like an artist rendering of Jack and Bobby Kennedy on the wall.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, she just, and then somewhere around I want to say 97, she looked around and went, you know what? This is not my party anymore, because she wasn't pro-abortion. She wasn't, they had at that point the moral issues had sort of taken the forefront of the Democrat Party, and know all of the things that make a good Christian woman just go, what the heck are you all doing here? And this is not my party. She went out and she changed her field. Now in California, we had closed primaries. It's the one thing that they did do.
Praise the Lord. It's so good.
Yeah, I know. She changed her affiliation. She went out and registered as a Republican before the next election, because she could not in good conscience vote that way anymore, because it did not reflect her values as a Christian. And so I think,
how long did that take, Kelly? I mean, think about that process. That was not something that happened in a 3-year plan.
No.
She was 4 years into Reagan at that point when she decided to switch over, probably. I mean, because you're looking at 77 to 80.
This was in 97. So
oh goodness,
when Bill Clinton was president, Mr.
So
Good
she
Time.
saw
Mr.
the
Good Time.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, she saw the
Yeah.
good. And
She
as
did.
it went into the point of I can't do it anymore,
Yeah.
you're talking more than a decade of that. So I
Yes.
think it's funny that we're sitting here now and it's almost good. And I don't say this, I didn't want Biden to get elected. Don't get me wrong. But it's almost good that Trump didn't get elected last time,
Yeah.
because what you've done is you've increased his length of exposure on
Yes.
our country. You
Yeah.
had 4 years and it would have been 8 at the
Yeah.
most. Well, now you've already got 8 years of Trump's exposure on our
Yeah.
land and our policies. And people
Yeah.
look at that and they're like, ooh, there's a stark contrast here now, isn't there?
Yeah.
Even though I would classify Trump as a traditional Democrat in every way.
Yeah.
He's a 1979 Democrat. There's
Yeah.
just no two ways around it. If you look at his policies, you compare them to what the Kennedy family was advocating for
Yes.
in the late 70s.
Yeah.
That's exactly what he's doing. He's not advocating for Republican Party platform or conservative principles. He's a Democrat, which makes sense. He grew up in New York City under Democrat influence of family,
Right.
labor, construction. He
Right.
was surrounded by Democrats. It's who he is. So when we talk about this crazy conservative guy, the Democrats are actually vilifying themselves, because
Yes.
they're saying that our principles as Democrats
Yeah.
that we used to adhere
Right.
to and
Right.
love,
Right.
those are wild and crazy.
Right.
That's nuts to me, Kelly.
Right.
I don't understand how a party can shift so quick. Now I do,
Oh,
because
yes.
it's a color revolution is what has
Right.
gone on. And the
Yes.
Democratic Party has embraced this. Look at the stuff they're doing with Hamas
Yeah.
and how they've embraced this radical hate
Right.
group.
Right.
They did it with BLM. They
Yeah.
keep getting tied up in every one of these radical hate group organizations,
Yep.
because that's the most emotional, it's
Yeah.
the lit fuse that they're always going for. They don't care about any of the principles behind it. Ooh, there's just something on fire. Let's go grab it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that is what they're going to be. As long as they're going to chase emotions in this way and
Yeah.
feelings, they're always going to be chasing the next explosive thing.
Right.
And I'll tell you, that's Marxism.
Well,
That's where they are.
and biblically, that's shifting sand. And we all
Always.
know about building our house on shifting sand. There's
That's right.
never going to be a solid base or foundation from which to build something great. So
Mhm.
that's what we have to focus on. Well, I want people to know where they can find you, Shawn. Where can they find you so that they can follow your work?
Well, Faith in Action airs all across the state of Tennessee every week. In Nashville market, you can hear us at 9:30 a.m. or 9 a.m. every Saturday morning on the Bot Radio Network. If you're in the Memphis market in West Tennessee, we're on Fridays at 3 o'clock, and we're celebrating our 5th year anniversary now. So we've been looking at a lot of our stuff and digging up old episodes, and we enjoy talking about politics and Christian worldview, just everything, whether it's life, Second Amendment. We've been doing this for 5 years now. So you can catch me on social media at Shawn Graham CCOT. That's CCOT for Conservative Christians in Tennessee. And we do different events around Nashville and in West Tennessee. We're always advocating for life and the principles of conservative biblical teaching.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much again for being with me today and the great work that you do. And I am ever so glad to have you fighting for truth here in Tennessee.
I love what you're doing, Kelly. Keep up the good work.
Thanks, Shawn, so much. And I will be speaking to you soon, I'm sure.
Yeah.